the terminal and put them off.
The Virgin cut-price flight for Impulse Airlines had all the fanfare, but then the Screaming Jets decided on some impromptu in-flight entertainment.
The magic dragon lives by the sea.
No one appreciated it, least of all Impulse and airport security.
We lost our frequent flyer points because we accidentally sang Puff the Magic Dragon.
Just disrupting the cabin, yelling. Too many screaming jets on this airport, I think.
The band members maintain they didn't do anything outrageous. In 11 years of flying, this is the first time they've been thrown off.
Now,
honestly, we're such good flyers usually. We're usually really good and people like to fly with us because we're fun and we sing a few kumbayas and a bit of fun there.
The plane eventually took off an hour and a half late. The band wasn't charged, resorting to an even cheaper way of flying to Sydney with frequent flyer points. There were minor hiccups too for Virgin Blue over the weekend.
Day takeoff, announcing a new cheap fare to Melbourne.
On its Brisbane debut, Impulse Airlines was christened in style as its plane taxied down the runway, but it didn't get airborne, instead turning back to its gate. Airport security was called in as rock band The Screaming Jets was escorted from the plane for unruly behaviour.
We tried to sing If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands, and there was a few people that knew it, and then we changed songs to Puff the Magic Dragon. No one knew it, and we got kicked off.
The airline says the band was threatening and offensive and appeared to be drunk. The captain left with no option but to turn back for the safety and comfort of other passengers.
We're trying to win passengers, not upset them.
With the Screaming Jets luggage removed from the plane, the flight eventually took off more than an hour late. But with only one plane on the Brisbane to Sydney route, flights for the rest of the day were also behind schedule.
It's not so much embarrassing, it's just a shame that they've delayed our aircraft.
Virgin Blue is hoping for better luck on its maiden flight from Brisbane to Sydney on Thursday.
We envisage...
Competition has stepped up on the Sydney-Brisbane air route, with Impulse today launching a new service just days before Virgin Blue takes to the skies. But it wasn't smooth sailing. Impulse's first flight delayed by a troublesome rock group.
On its Brisbane debut, Impulse Airlines was christened in style as its plane taxied down the runway, but it didn't get airborne, instead turning back to its gate. Airport security was called in as rock band The Screaming Jets was escorted from the plane for unruly behaviour.
We tried to sing If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands, and there was a few people that knew it, and then we changed songs to Puff the Magic Dragon. No one knew it, and we got kicked off.
The airline says the band was threatening and offensive and appeared to be drunk. The captain left with no option but to turn back for the safety and comfort of other passengers.
We're trying to win passengers, not upset them.
With the Screaming Jets luggage removed from the plane, the flight eventually took off more than an hour late. But with only one plane on the Brisbane to Sydney route, flights for the rest of the day were also behind schedule.
It's not so much embarrassing.
The passengers.
It was an embarrassing start to the launch of Impulse Airlines' highly publicised $33 flight between Brisbane and Sydney. The aircraft taxied down the runway, then turned back. Members of the five-man Australian rock band The Screaming Jets were being thrown off the plane.
We had a few disruptive passengers on board that were intoxicated, and the cabin crew elected, in the interest of safety, to have them removed.
We tried to sing If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands, and there was a few people that knew it, and then we changed songs to Puff the Magic Dragon. No one knew it, and we got kicked off.
The band members were escorted off the plane by airport security. They were then interviewed by police.
That's a police matter. They've got them in hand, and we'll let them deal with it.
The plane took off after more than an hour's wait. As a result, both Brisbane and Sydney flights were delayed throughout the day.
Too many screaming jets on this airport, are they?
The Screaming Jets admit they were intoxicated, but say they hadn't been drinking this morning.
This never happened to the Wiggles.
The band's managers deny the event was a publicity stunt, but rather a light-hearted gesture that was taken too seriously. The band says it's been told police will not be taking the matter further. Kieran McKechnie, ABC News, Brisbane.
There are some signs of
Grounding its first flight until the boisterous band was thrown off the plane.
It was the first scheduled flight from Brisbane for the budget airline Impulse, but there were no screaming jets this morning. But apparently there was some screaming being done inside the plane. Halfway down the runway, takeoff was aborted.
We had a few disruptive passengers on board that were intoxicated.
The plane returned to the airport and members of the Australian rock band, the Screaming Jets, were kicked off. One band member claims they were just trying to get the other passengers into the party spirit.
We tried to sing If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands, and there was a few people that knew it, and then we changed songs to Puff the Magic Dragon, and no one knew it, and we got kicked off.
Police escorted the band away for questioning. It's uncertain whether charges will be laid. While their bags were taken off the plane, the other passengers were forced to wait. The flight took off more than an hour later, delaying flights throughout Australia for the rest of the day.
This will certainly upset not just these passengers, but on every flight after this.
Even so, Impulse has beat its budget competitor Virgin Blue to the skies by 3 days. Impulse will be operating 4 return flights between Sydney and Brisbane each weekday, plus weekend trips, doubling the schedule in mid-September.
You know it, clap your hands, don't sing that on Impulse.
The Screaming Jets were left to party on their own. They were last seen heading hopefully to the Qantas desk. Linda Russell, 10 News.
Lived up to their name today as they boarded an Impulse plane for a flight from Brisbane to Sydney. It was the airline's inaugural flight for the route, but it was delayed for more than an hour while the band was kicked off for being too boisterous.
The first flight got a spectacular hosing down as it prepared to leave Brisbane, and a little later, so did some of the passengers. The Impulse jet was taxiing towards the runway when members of the Screaming Jets began to celebrate their journey back to Sydney. They were a little premature. The plane turned round and dumped the rockers back at the terminal.
We lost our frequent flyer points because we accidentally sang Puff the Magic Dragon.
Impulse doesn't have frequent flyer points, and it won't have the Screaming Jets either.
We're trying to win passengers, not upset them, and this will certainly upset not just these passengers, but on every flight after this as we try and pick up time.
2 hours late, Impulse was finally flying south. The incident may have delayed the inaugural flight, but the passengers said they didn't begrudge the lost time, and most had nothing but praise for the way the crew handled the situation.
There was a couple of people drunk on the plane, and yeah, they got them off.
They just handled it very well.
The Screaming Jet